The rain poured down like a curtain drawn over the city, soaking everything it touched in a cold, uncaring silence. The streets of Lagos, usually alive with shouting vendors, rushing buses, and the humming of everyday struggle, now felt like a stage for something quiet and heavy. The early morning haze wrapped around the market stalls like a memory, blurring the bright colors of fruits and fabric into a dull watercolor of existence. In the corner of a busy junction, next to a kiosk with a rusted Coca-Cola sign, sat a woman whose presence most eyes skipped over, as if she were part of the pavement. Her clothes were torn, soaked, clinging to her body, revealing the outline of someone too thin for her age. Her skin, once probably radiant, had grown tired under the sun and streetlights. But it was her eyes, large, dark, always looking down or away, that held a quiet ocean of stories. Cradled tightly in her arms was a baby, wrapped in what looked like a piece of curtain fabric, shielding the child from the rain as best she could. The baby was silent, too cold to cry, its lips trembling with a soft blue that was easy to miss unless you really looked. No one really looked. People passed her by with umbrellas held high, trousers lifted above puddles, mouths full of complaints about the weather. A few spared her a glance, not of compassion, but irritation. One woman muttered, "She should go back to her village, always spoiling the city view." A man nudged his friend and laughed. "See as she born peekin' with no plan. Dem full ground like ants." She heard them all, every word, every judgment that fell on her like the rain, steady, cold, merciless. But she didn't react. She just pressed her baby closer to her chest and blinked slowly, like someone whose heart had long ago stopped hoping for kindness. Her name was Adeze, but no one called her that anymore. On the street, she had no name, just beggar, woman, or sometimes nothing at all. Her hands, cracked and dirty, still carried the grace of someone who once braided hair with care, who once cooked a goosey soup with gentle fingers. Her back hunched slightly, not just from the weight of her child, but from the invisible burden of every night slept on concrete, every stomach she couldn't fill. Behind her, a vendor shouted about discount plantains, and a Danfo bus honked impatiently as it swerved too close to the curb, splashing her legs with muddy water. Still, she didn't move. Still, she didn't cry. Then, a group of schoolboys passed, their uniforms half tucked and shoes splashing through puddles. One of them stopped, staring at a daisy and her baby with the bold curiosity of youth. "Mummy, look, that baby looks like it's dying," he said, not out of cruelty, but sheer innocence. The mother yanked him forward, whispering harshly, "Don't look, just walk." Daisy's lips quivered at that. Not because of the child's words, those were perhaps the most honest she had heard in days, but because even honesty was unwanted here. To look at her was to feel something, and people had learned not to feel. As the clouds above rumbled again, a soft wind pushed through the street like a warning. Somewhere nearby, thunder cracked, loud enough to make some vendors jump. Arias shivered, not just from the wetness clinging to her skin, but from the knowing, the unshakable feeling that this day, though just another rainy Tuesday for most, was about to become something else. She felt it in the air, in the way people's steps quickened, in the way her baby stirred slightly in her arms. And just then, a black car, polished like onyx, windows dark like secrets, slowed to a stop a few feet from her, engine humming like a lion. The street didn't notice. The market didn't stop, but Adeze, tired and invisible as she was, raised her head slightly, and her eyes, those deep, weary eyes, locked on the car for one heartbeat too long. The car didn't move, its dark surface glistening under the falling rain like some creature that didn't belong on the street. Addie stared at it, not with hope, but with confusion. Rich people's cars never stopped here. They passed through like they were allergic to poverty, like their engines would stall if they dared slow down in this part of town. Yet this one had stopped, its engine low and smooth, like a whispered secret. She looked around, unsure if it was just traffic or if somehow, impossibly, it had stopped for her. Then the back window rolled down, slow and silent, and from the shadows inside, a face appeared. A man, light-skinned, young, with a trimmed beard and eyes that didn't look away when they met hers. He was dressed in a sharp gray suit, the kind she had only seen in magazines thrown away behind tailoring shops. For a second, no one else in the world existed. Not the sellers arguing over pepper prices, not the rain beating down in steady rhythm, not even the baby breathing faintly in her arms. Just those eyes, his and hers, locked together in a strange silence. Then the door opened. That, at least, broke the spell. A tall, well-dressed man stepped out, holding a large black umbrella. He didn't rush, he didn't hesitate. He simply walked up to her, stopping just before his shiny shoes could touch the edge of her wet mat. People noticed now. Two women selling tomatoes paused mid-sentence. A bike man craned his neck so hard he nearly hit a pothole. Even the schoolboys from before had circled back, whispering behind a nearby stall. The man under the umbrella stood in the rain like someone who belonged in another movie, another country, another life. He said nothing at first, just looked down at her, not with disgust, not pity either. Something else, something deeper. She blinked, her lips parted like she wanted to speak but had forgotten how. Finally, his voice broke the silence. It was deep, quiet, the kind that made you listen. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated. It had been so long since anyone asked. "Adies," she said softly, unsure if her voice would carry, but it did. He nodded. "And the baby?" She looked down at the little bundle in her arms. "Obinna," she replied, brushing rainwater from the child's tiny forehead. The man looked at the child for a long moment. Then, without warning, he took off his coat, a tailored, expensive-looking piece of fabric, and dropped it gently over her shoulders. Adies gasped, her eyes wide. She clutched it like it was made of gold, unsure what to say, unsure what was happening. Who was this man? Why was he being kind? He didn't wait for her to ask. "Come with me," he said gently, but she shrank back. "I can't, I—" Her voice trembled. She had heard stories of girls tricked, of people used and thrown away. She couldn't trust so easily, no matter how kind his eyes were. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, kneeling slightly now, closer to her level. "I just want to help." She stared at him. This stranger with a soft voice and dry clothes, kneeling in dirty water, like it didn't matter. Then, for some reason she couldn't explain, she nodded. He stood and helped her up. She stumbled, legs weak from cold and hunger. A security guard from the car appeared, rushing forward with an umbrella. The rich man raised a hand. "No," he said calmly. "Let her walk under mine." The umbrella came back over her. For the first time in years, Ade stood under shelter that wasn't falling apart. As they walked to the car, whispers chased behind them. "Who is that man? Is he mad? She's cursed, can't he see?" But the whispers melted into the sound of rain as the car door closed behind her. Inside was warm, so warm that it made her shiver harder, like her body had forgotten how to receive comfort. The seats were leather, soft like pillows. She held Obinna tighter, afraid to let him touch anything. The man sat beside her, quietly watching. "My name is Chiki," he said. "You don't need to be afraid." She nodded, still too stunned to speak. The car moved, gliding smoothly over the potholes of the city, taking her somewhere she had never been before. As buildings passed and the sky shifted from gray to silver, Adaz looked down at Obinna. His eyes were open now, weak but awake. And for the first time in days, she allowed herself to believe he might live. They arrived at a large house, not just large, but majestic. Gates open like they were waiting just for her. The staff came forward, puzzled but polite. Cheek whispered something to his housekeeper, who immediately ran off. Adaz was led inside. Floors that shine like glass, walls with paintings, the scent of something baking. She felt dizzy, unsure if she had died and this was heaven, but she was too tired to think. She was taken to a room, warm and filled with soft light. A nurse came, then another. Obinna was checked, cleaned, wrapped in new blankets. The doctor said something in low tones to Chike. He nodded and then turned to her. He's very weak, but he'll be okay. He just needs food, care, and rest. Like you. At those words, something inside Adai's broke. The tears came, quiet at first, then stronger. Not because she was sad, but because someone had finally said she deserved to rest. That night, she slept in a real bed. The sheets were white. The room was quiet. Obinna slept beside her, his breathing steady. She dreamt of things she had buried long ago, her mother's voice, the smell of rain on mango trees, laughter. When she woke the next morning, sunlight poured in through the window, golden and warm. And for the first time in years, she wasn't cold. Cheek was there, sitting in the chair near the window with a tray of food. "Good morning," he said. His smile wasn't wide, but it was real. "I didn't know if you'd stay." She sat up slowly, blinking in the light. "Why me?" she asked. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. "Because once, a long time ago, I watched someone I loved suffer in silence. I was too young, too powerless to help her then. But I'm not anymore. And I can't keep walking past pain like it's invisible." Adaze didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken like that to her before. She looked at him, not as a rich man anymore, but as someone who had known pain too. A silent understanding passed between them, the kind that doesn't need many words. Cheek stood. "Eat. Rest. You're safe now." Then he left the room. She looked at the tray, rice, eggs, bread, tea, food she didn't have to beg for. Slowly, she began to eat. Every bite a reminder that this wasn't a dream. This was real. And though she didn't know what tomorrow would bring, for the first time in forever, tomorrow didn't feel like a curse. Days passed like gentle waves, one after the other, each one softer than the last. Adaze began to heal in ways she didn't even know she needed. Her body grew stronger, her skin less pale, her eyes brighter. Though they still carried shadows, Obinna, under the warmth of real blankets and real love, began to smile again. The house was quiet most of the time, with kind workers who offered her tea without pity in their voices. But it was Cheek's presence that shifted everything. He didn't hover or smother. Instead, he passed through her world like a patient light, knocking gently before entering a room, sitting quietly nearby when the silence felt heavy, never pushing her to speak about her past. But Adias noticed things. How he looked out of the window too long sometimes, as if chasing ghosts in the clouds. How he never raised his voice, not even to the staff. How he would touch a photo frame in the hallway every time he passed it. A woman, young, with sad eyes like hers. She guessed it was someone important. Maybe the person he couldn't save, the one that made him stop for her that rainy day. One evening, while the air outside was soft with the scent of wet earth, Adaze found herself sitting with him in the garden. Obinna was asleep upstairs, and the sky above them held stars like scattered prayers. Chike sat beside her, hands clasped, and spoke after a long silence. "You remind me of my sister," he said. "Her name was Amara. She died 5 years ago." Adeze turned slightly, surprised. He had never spoken of his past before. "What happened?" she asked, her voice gentle. "She ran away," he said, eyes far away, "from an abusive marriage. She came home with her baby, no money, no help. And I didn't listen. I told her to stay strong, to be patient. I thought love and patience could fix everything. One day, she left again. I never saw her alive after that." His voice cracked at the end, the pain raw, even after all those years. "She died on the street," he whispered. "Starved. Alone. Her child was taken in by strangers." Adiz's chest ached. a deep ache that wrapped around her lungs like wire. She reached out without thinking, her hand resting over his. He didn't flinch. I was so full of dreams then, he continued, trying to build this company, to prove myself. I didn't see she was drowning. And now, every time I pass someone in pain, I wonder if she would still be alive if I had just stopped. Adaze blinked hard, trying to keep her tears in. You saved me, she said, her voice thick. You saved Obina. Maybe that's her gift to us. Cheek looked at her then, really looked, and in that moment, it felt like two broken souls saw each other fully. No masks, no shame, just truth. The next morning, something changed. A car pulled up at the gate, expensive, flashy, loud. A woman stepped out, dressed in heels that clicked like anger against the pavement. She wore perfume too thick, glasses too dark. Cheek met her in the front yard, tension in his posture. Adai's watched from upstairs, her heart thudding. The woman spoke fast, waving her hand, her voice rising. You're losing focus, Cheeky. Bringing strays into the house. What will the board think? Cheek's reply was calm but firm. She's not a stray. She's a human being. The woman scoffed. This will ruin your image. What if the press finds out? A homeless girl with a baby. People will say she trapped you. Cheek took a step closer. Let them say what they want. I'm not building my life on silence and cruelty. The woman's mouth tightened. You'll regret this. She turned sharply, storming back into her car. Adaz stood frozen, shame curling in her stomach like smoke. She didn't want to be a problem. She didn't want to bring chaos into someone's world. That night, after everyone slept, she quietly packed what little she had. A few clothes Chicky had bought her, a note she had written to Obina for when he was older, and her heart. She kissed her baby's forehead and whispered, You'll be safe. You have him now. She left the house through the back gate, the same way she had once slipped out of her family home long ago. The city was quieter now, but still cruel, still wet with the memory of pain, but Chika noticed before sunrise. He saw the empty bed, the missing blankets. Panic rose in him like a fire. He searched the street, the nearby alleys, asking guards, calling friends. No one had seen her. Hours passed. Finally, he returned home, standing outside in the same spot where he first saw her. Then he noticed the note. It had fallen under Obina's crib. He picked it up with shaking hands and read it. Thank you for everything. You gave me more kindness in a week than I had in my whole life. But I don't want to ruin yours. Please take care of Obina. Love him like he's your own. If he grows up with even half your heart, he'll become a man the world can't break. Cheek's eyes blurred. The pain returned, sharp, personal, like losing Amara all over again. But he wasn't the same man he had been back then. Not anymore. Cheek sat in his office the next day, but nothing around him seemed real. The polished floor, the smooth desk, the clicking sound of the ceiling fan, all of it felt empty without her presence in the house. Obina was there, wrapped in his blanket, quietly fed and watched by the housekeeper. But he had begun to cry more often, like he felt her absence even without words. Cheek had read Adazi's letter at least 10 times. Every word in her delicate handwriting carried more weight than any board meeting, more depth than any deal he had ever signed. He knew what people would say, that he had done enough, that she had made her choice. But something inside him, something raw and human, wouldn't accept that she was just gone. Not again. Not like Amara. He had a second chance, and this time, he would not let the story end in silence. So he did what no billionaire had done before in that part of Lagos. He began searching. Personally. He left his house in the same dark car, but this time, it wasn't just a ride through the city. It was a mission. He drove through the areas she had once begged in, through the market where she had sat in the rain. He spoke to vendors who remembered the quiet girl with the baby, now wide-eyed that the rich man was asking for her. She left early yesterday, one woman said, biting her nails. Didn't even take the bread we gave her, just walked off like she had somewhere to go. But no one knew where. Some shook their heads. Some warned him. Oga, these street girls, they don't come back once they vanish. But Cheek didn't stop. He printed her photo, not a mugshot, not a blurry, sad image. He had the housekeeper help him capture the moment from their security feed. Adez smiling faintly while feeding Obinna in the garden, sunlight warming her face. He printed dozens, then hundreds, passed them around like a man passing out prayers. He paid drivers to look. He paid security men to ask around. He gave his phone number to strangers. Days passed, then a week. His eyes grew tired. He couldn't sleep. Obinna clung to him like a shadow now, his baby hands holding onto the collar of his shirt like he knew, somehow, that this man wouldn't stop looking. Then, one rainy afternoon, not unlike the day they met, a call came from a church. A priest had recognized her from the photo. "She came in yesterday," the man said gently. "She was weak. She said she just wanted a quiet corner to rest." Cheek dropped everything. When he arrived, soaked from running inside, the priest led him quietly to the back. There, curled up on a bench, was Adiz, her body smaller somehow, her eyes closed. She looked like she might disappear if he blinked. But as he knelt beside her, her eyes opened. Slowly, unbelieving, she stared at him like she was seeing a dream. "Why are you here?" she whispered. Her voice was barely there. "You should have forgotten me." Cheek shook his head. "You don't get to disappear like this. You're not a problem I needed to solve, Adiz. You're someone I wanted to stay." Her lips trembled. She sat up slowly, pain in every movement. "I thought I was doing the right thing, letting you live without the weight of me." Cheek took her hands in his. "You are not a weight. You are not shame. You're the most courageous person I've ever met. You survived things that would break most people. You gave your son everything you had, even when you had nothing." Tears ran silently down her cheeks. For once, she didn't wipe them away. "I was so afraid," she said. "Afraid that love like that wasn't real. That maybe I imagined it. That maybe people like me don't get rescued. Not truly." Cheek leaned forward, his voice rough with emotion. "You didn't imagine it. I meant every word. And I will say them every day if you let me." There was a long pause between them. The rain pattered softly outside the church windows. Then, with the kind of slow certainty that only comes after heartbreak, Adiz nodded. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'll believe you." Cheek stood, helping her to her feet gently, like she was something precious. Because she was. She leaned into him, and he didn't let go. He never would. As they walked back through the church hallway, a nun smiled gently at them from afar, her hands clasped like she was witnessing something holy. Outside, the car waited. Obinna bundled in the back seat, held safely by the housekeeper who had grown to love him like her own. When Adize opened the door and saw her baby smile, a sound escaped her lips, soft, shaky, and full of life. That night, back home, she didn't ask whose house it was. She didn't whisper about leaving again. She let herself be wrapped in warmth, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, love had found her not to test her, but to keep her. And Cheek, sitting beside her as Abina played with his fingers, knew that this was what healing looked like: messy, slow, painful, and worth every second. Months passed like whispered blessings, soft and healing. The seasons shifted. Rains gave way to warmth. And the house that once echoed with quiet footsteps now hummed with life. Adiz no longer walked with her shoulders hunched. Her eyes no longer darted around, bracing for cruelty. She laughed more often, not loudly, not carelessly, but like someone rediscovering what it meant to breathe fully. Obinna learned to walk in the wide garden, stumbling across grass under the watchful gaze of a man who once stood in a storm, wondering if he could ever make peace with the past. Cheek watched them every day with a quiet ache in his chest, not from pain anymore, but from the awe of watching something broken become whole. He had spent his life chasing things that looked perfect: buildings, businesses, glass towers with his name etched in gold, but none of that compared to the sight of Obinna giggling under the sun, or Adaz humming softly as she folded tiny clothes with care. Some people still talked, of course. Whispers floated through society's cold halls that he had lost his mind, that a woman from the street had somehow caught him. But Cheek never answered them, not with words. He let his actions speak. How he walked with her into charity galas hand in hand, how he introduced her to his team not as a project, but as his partner, how he stood beside her when she launched a small foundation in Amara's name, offering help to young mothers with nowhere to go. No one should sleep in the rain holding a child, she said during her first public speech, her voice trembling but strong. The room had gone still, her words simple yet powerful, cut through every polished accent, every stiff suit. Some clapped politely, others looked away, but Cheek, he had never looked more proud. At home they had a rhythm now. Cheek cooked on Sundays, badly but with heart. Adaze planted flowers in places once bare. Obinna called her Mama and Cheek Papa, without ever needing to be taught. It came naturally, like rain to soil. They never rushed anything. Love came slowly between them, not in grand declarations, but in quiet gestures. A cup of tea left beside a bed, a hand held in sleep, a glance across the room that said, I see you. I'm here. A Daisy still had scars, not all of them visible. Sometimes she'd wake in the night, heart racing, reaching for her child. Cheek would hold her without asking questions. And sometimes Cheek would sit outside in the dark, haunted by a photo on the hallway wall. Ades would join him, resting her head on his shoulder, saying nothing. It was enough. One day, as they walked through a children's hospital supported by her new foundation, a little girl reached out and tugged Adaize's dress. Are you a queen? The girl asked shyly. Adaize knelt, smiling, eyes shining. No, she whispered, but once I lived like a ghost, and now I'm alive. The girl didn't understand the words, but she giggled anyway, and Adaize laughed too. From across the room, Cheek watched her. This woman, who once sat drenched in the rain, invisible to the world. Now here she was, shining quietly, not needing a crown to prove her worth. As the sun dipped behind the hospital that evening, painting the sky with soft oranges and fading purples, the three of them stood together, not as billionaire and beggar, not as savior and saved, but as something new, as family. Life wouldn't always be easy. The past didn't disappear, but love had taken root where pain once lived. And from that soil, something beautiful had grown.